Couple of days ago, I had a gentleman, or whoever it was, I can't remember who the ex-person was, left a couple of links on one of my articles in the comments section as regarding Egypt and Russia rekindling the relations, and that a arms deal was probably going to go down. And I wrote the gentleman back and told him, you really can't believe everything you hear and read in the newspaper, and that everything isn't always as it seems. And I also indicated that Stratford had already written an article regarding that and what the outcome would likely be. And for the most part, many are trying to send messages to one another to indicate the importance of keeping a close relationship with one or the other. And that's really what Egypt is trying to do. They're trying to send a message to the United States that, hey, if you won't supply us with arms, then we'll go somewhere else. But unfortunately, Egypt doesn't have any money. And the United States basically was giving away arms in the form of military aid to the Egyptians. So I'm not so sure they can use that as leverage against the United States, since they were getting their military, the best weapons in the world, for free anyway. But Russia, not being one to let an opportunity go by, although they are certain that they're not going to be able to sway Egypt away from the United States, and this is what Stratford says in the end on their analysis, even with so many important potential deals, there are limits on the Russian-Egyptian relationship and on Russia replacing the United States in relations with Egypt. Egypt will always have some sort of relationship with the United States, and Russian support so far from home is typically piecemeal as Moscow deals with domestic problems. Moreover, Egypt's Gulf Arab allies would not be welcoming of Cairo's attempts to swap Washington for Moscow. So even though this looks to be some type of a courtship, in the long run, Egypt knows that their Arab and Islamic allies would not be too happy with Egypt, and it wouldn't go over well if they tried to swap the United States with Russia. But at this time, Egypt and Russia are seeking an advantage they can from rekindling the relationship while the region realigns. Egypt has specific needs that Russia can fill, and Russia needs to continue shaping the Middle East in order to keep the U.S. focus far from its immediate region. And you know, that's really what Russia's all about. And they are really just trying to cover their area. They basically have got into the mix with Egypt to keep the focus on their relationship, or so I say the United States is focused on the relationship between Russia and Egypt, so that they can keep the United States out of their region. You know, for years the United States has been shaping Russia's borders with American allies, and that has become a very big problem for Russia. In fact, they've had to flex a little bit of muscle. If you remember a couple years back that when Georgia became an ally of the United States, Russia jumped right in there and said, hey, listen, we're going to attack you, and there's nothing you can do about it, and we'll see what your American allies do. And of course the United States didn't do anything, and they seen exactly what the reach of the United States was. Don't be naive. I can tell you that the United States is not going to come to your rescue if it does not meet your interests, and that goes for Israel, Saudi Arabia, or any of the other nations that they are an ally with. The potential rewards have to outweigh the potential problems that it can create. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to address this now. A couple of weeks ago, I had someone comment on one of my videos regarding the strike, the most recent strike on Syria's attempt to transfer weapons to Hezbollah, and in the end, the United States ratted them out after they had done it. But the comment was that I'm of the mind and have read many intelligence reports that I know that Israel doesn't make too many moves without notifying the United States first. And the commenter basically wrote me back and said that's not true. Israel has made lots of decisions without informing the United States. And I said, well, that's not in today's world anyway. And the commenter had made mention of the Six-Day War in '67 when many of Israel's neighbors attacked them. And I do, of course, I went back and did some research on that because it's been a while since I'd done a little research. I thought that they basically had informed the United States and consulted them, but I wasn't 100% sure, but sure enough that they did. I went back and looked at some of the transcripts of that war, and the United States was very aware of what was going on during that war. In fact, they became a very big supplier of continuous military supplies that gave Israel a decided edge. But getting back to this most recent attack on Syria, in fact, there was an article that just came out yesterday that indicated that the United States was informed 9 hours before Israel attacked Syria and destroyed some of these weapons. So in fact, they did inform the United States before they attacked. Now, one thing I will say, they may have attacked, and the United States may not have been 100% behind the attack, meaning they may have frowned at it and let it go through, but they didn't like it, because it wasn't too much longer after that they basically ratted them out in a planned leak. So my message is basically this: is don't think for a minute that Israel is going to attack Iran without consulting the United States. I mean, the United States may allow Israel to attack some distant bunker where there are weapons being transferred to Hezbollah, but they're certainly not going to allow Israel to mess up what is about to become a major shift in Middle East policy and the realignment of the whole area. And frankly, Russia is completely terrified that this agreement between the United States will become more than just a relaxation of sanctions and some of the funds that they may have tied up in banks. And Stratford did an article an analysis on this, and it's entitled Russia Warily Eyes a U.S.-Iran Deal. And it says Russia is concerned that the U.S.-Iranian accord could alter the regional balance of power at Moscow's expense. Even before the possible peace accord, the Kremlin was worried that the U.S. military withdrawal from much of the Islamic world would give the United States more freedom of action elsewhere. And that's the real problem. One of Russia's main goals in the Middle East is to keep the United States tied up, trying to put out fires in the Middle East so that they don't begin to focus their sights on other areas such as Asia, or even and especially in their area of the woods. The article goes on to say, and an agreement with Iran could undermine Moscow's influence in the Middle East and open the door to U.S.-Iranian cooperation along Russia's southern borderlines. Like many other global and regional players with a stake in the outcome of the talks, Russia will have to contemplate a world in which Iran and the United States are not at odds. Over the past 2 decades, Russia has been one of Iran's primary supporters at a time when Tehran was relatively isolated in the international community and had hostile relations with many Western powers. However, Moscow and Tehran never shared any particular affinity. In other words, they really have nothing in common, and their partnership is kind of odd. In fact, Russia and Iran have historically competed for influence in Turkey, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. During their imperial periods, Persia and Russia fought several large wars from 1721 to 1822 or 1828. While the Soviet Union was the first state to recognize the Islamic Republic in 1979, relations between the two were cool, in part because Tehran condemned Moscow's restrictions on religion, and the Soviets were already allied with Iraq. But following the fall of the Soviet Union, relations between Tehran and Moscow began to warm, while Iran's international isolation was growing. Russia committed to take over construction of Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant and became a source of military hardware for Iran. Russia has also provided Iran with intelligence on a range of matters, including Israeli networks in Lebanon and U.S. and British plans to destabilize the Iranian government by, for example, taking advantage of the 2009 Green Revolution protests. For much of the 2000s, U.S. attention, military and otherwise, was focused on the Islamic world, from the wars in Iraq to Afghanistan to the standoff with Iran. Moscow took advantage of Washington's preoccupation to start rolling back Western influence in Western's borderlands. In addition, Russia could leverage its ties with Iran in negotiations with Washington on other matters, such as U.S. support for anti-Russian governments in Ukraine and Georgia. The relationship with Iran was also a way for Russia to secure its southern flank and limit Iran-Russian competition in the region. Well, now that could be going by the wayside, Russia is now worried that not only could Iran become a distant ally of the United States, they could become a trading partner and open up new lands to not only Turkey but other parts of the world. And this is something that Russia simply can't take. And you know, Russia's always used Iran as a bargaining chip for dealing with the United States. It says, in fact, the article says, indeed, Moscow has found the standoff between Iran and the United States to be a particularly useful foreign policy tool. For example, during Moscow's negotiations with Washington over U.S. missile defense installations in Central Europe, Russia threatened to counter by selling S-300 missile defense systems to Iran. But Russia has been careful not to support Iran too much, both because a strengthened Iran could threaten Russia's southern flank and because it could provoke the United States and its allies into taking action against Moscow. So don't think for a minute that Russia is going to stand in the face of the Western world. They simply don't have that type of power anymore. So they can only push the United States so far. But you know what? That's kind of what Russia is doing right now in the Middle East. They're trying to keep the United States looking at the Middle East so that they can keep them off their borderlands. Now here's the real problem that Russia sees. It says, should there be a true rapprochement with Iran, it could free Washington to focus more on other parts of the world. Moscow is worried that Washington would expand its attention both in Russia's periphery, where it has been attempting to boost its influence, and inside Russia itself, where the United States has actively supported anti-Kremlin groups. Russia would not be able to use Iran to counter any U.S. activities against Moscow's interests if, in fact, the United States and Iran were to come to some type of agreement. And it has little else that is comparably effective in negotiations with Washington. See, Russia for all this time has been negotiating with Washington over Iran to help control Iran. So anytime that Russia wanted something, they would just say, okay, we'll give you this and sell out Iran if, in fact, you will give us this. And Washington would come to some negotiated agreement. But if, in fact, Iran and the United States come to some type of a peace agreement, that all goes by the wayside. And here is a second concern. It says the second concern is how much the U.S.-Iranian relationship warms in the long term. Iran alone cannot threaten Russia in the region, since the Islamic Republic is much smaller economically and militarily. However, U.S. backing could allow Iran to weaken Russia's regional position. Moscow cannot be certain that improved U.S.-Iranian ties would not eventually lead to increased military cooperation and support similar to Washington's relationship with Tehran in the decades before Iran's Islamic Revolution in 1979. Well, we know from Scripture that that's simply not going to happen. That Russia will indeed form a strong enough bond that Iran will come in with Russia to lead an attack with the intention of taking a spoil in Israel. In fact, not only Russia will get Iran to come in with them, but they'll get Turkey as well. But here's another thing that Russia is really worried about if this particular agreement was to come to fruition, which it likely is. But this is what Stratford has to say about that. It says that Iran has the potential to be a regional energy competitor to Russia. This is something they're afraid of if, in fact, they do come to an agreement with the United States. And it can act as a land bridge for Eurasian transit through the Russian borderlands to the Persian Gulf. Turkey is Russia's second largest energy consumer, as well as another regional rival to Moscow's influence in its borderlands. Ankara has been looking for alternative suppliers for energy in order to reduce its dependence on Russia. Though there are minor alternatives such as Azerbaijan, Iran has the potential to seriously compete with Russia on the energy production front. Iran is already a minor energy supporter or exporter to Turkey, but with increased foreign investment and support in Iran's energy sector, particularly from the U.S. firms, the country could increase its production on a scale that might challenge Russian energy dominance in the region. So not only is Russia worried that this Iran-U.S. deal could bring peace, it also, if you haven't noticed, that lately that oil prices are beginning to drop, and drop pretty rapidly, I might add. This is simply not good for Russia, because there is a price point in which they start losing money if it goes below a certain dollar amount. So if indeed there is a agreement between the United States and Iran, you may see historically low gas prices come to your local gas pump. So this new friendship between the United States and Iran, as shallow as it may be, has really come to be a major problem for Russia, and will serve to be that possibly in the short run. Of course, we know in the long run, Russia and Iran will continue to be partners, and that one day they will attack Israel and all. But this is what the article ends with. It says the Kremlin understands these vulnerabilities, but it also sees that there is little it can do to interrupt the trajectory of U.S.-Iran negotiations. Instead, Russia has to be thinking of how to protect its position in a changing world. If Iran is no longer an option, finding a new tool to counter U.S. actions and shoring up the southern borderlands will be at the top of Moscow's list of priorities. Now, I received a news alert this afternoon from Stratfor that the U.S. and Iran were very close to an interim deal. I have no doubt that they will come to an agreement, to some type of interim deal. Someone had written to me the other day saying that they thought, from my analysis, that I was saying that we were years away from the rapture of the church, based upon some of these agreements that I indicated, said that will take years, they'll be years in the making. Now, basically you misunderstood what I was trying to say. The rapture of the church could take place at any moment. In fact, it could happen today. But don't think for a minute that the rapture is going to take place and then the tribulation period is going to begin. It may be days, weeks, months, years from the time the rapture takes place that the tribulation period finally begins. Now, there's something you should also know, and something that it gets very little attention in Bible prophecy, and that is that the European Union is in a serious mess, and from the analysis that I've written, it's going to be years, it won't be anytime soon, that unemployment is going to drop in the European Union. It's going to stay historically high for the foreseeable future, and don't think for a minute that's not going to be a major problem in the near future. And in fact, I think this continued high unemployment in the European Union is going to be the catalyst that will bring about a super leader, such as the Antichrist, to rule the European Union, and these rulers will give or lend their power to the Antichrist, or the future ruler they will have, and he will be a supernatural ruler that will change laws and will, I believe, cause the European Union's fortunes to change, and he will basically cause the European Union to prosper. And it will be through a great deception that he will do such. And this turnaround will be so miraculous that I believe that much of the world will begin to adopt his economic philosophies and his peace philosophies. Because the Bible says that the Antichrist will start the 7-year tribulation period by brokering a peace with Israel and many. But I think what you see going on in Iran, what I was trying to say is that this Iran-U.S. peace agreement will not be a overnight thing. It will be done in stages, and some of the sanctions will be lifted in stages, and some of the funds will be lifted in stages, and it will take years before it's finally through. Much like when the Antichrist brings about peace in the Middle East, there will be some type of interim agreement that will be run in stages. And the first thing that will be agreed upon are borders, and then certain sections of the West Bank will be turned over to the Palestinians, and the final jewel will be the splitting of Jerusalem as a capital for both Israel and the Palestinian state. Now, frankly, I don't think it will ever come down to that. I think that the Lord will come back for his second coming long before he allows Jerusalem to be split down the middle and to become a Palestinian capital. But there's one thing we do know, that we are looking for the rapture of the church. Then I believe peace will come. Then sudden destruction will follow. Now, as I've said many times, is that to say that we won't have a few skirmishes in between that? Sure we will. That's very possible that Israel could attack Hezbollah, Hamas, or some other regional player that might interfere. I don't, however, see that they will ever attack Iran. And if they do, I certainly don't believe that the neighbors that Israel has will attack Israel in retaliation for their attack on Iran. That's not going to happen with Saudi Arabia. And there's something else you should probably know regarding Syria. There was a report the other day that indicated that Syria very well may be broken up, and it may no longer be a nation any longer. In fact, the Kurds have already determined that they are going to declare independence from Syria. And Henry Kissinger stated that he believed the only way to actually wrestle power from Assad is to start breaking up, if they want the civil war to end, to start breaking up the state of Syria and start piecemealing it out to different areas. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. And I think that basically Mr. Assad will probably get his little piece of what will be left of Syria in and around Damascus. But much of the other region, I think, will be sectioned off. I think that, right now I don't see this civil war going on much longer. I think, like I said, it's going to be broken up into little pieces. And just by attrition, I think this war will finally end. But don't be shocked if Syria is basically sectioned off piece by piece and basically taken over by different factions or warlords or whatever the case may be in certain regions. And of course, Turkey and Iran are already staking their claims in various areas of Syria and will continue to try to defuse this war diplomatically. And it should also be noted that it's very possible that the United States, if in fact they do come to an agreement with Iran, will use Iran to try to end this Syrian civil war between the rebels and the regime. I have to believe that they are going to use their leverage in order to do that. So once this agreement is established, look for the United States to use their newfound status with Iran to overtake and overthrow this civil war and to bring it to a negotiated standstill. Well, that's all I have for you today, but as always, I like to present the gospel, and that is that Jesus died for your sins, and he rose again so that you might have life eternal. And this is a free gift, but you know what? Like any free gift, if you don't receive it, if you don't take it, it's useless to you. 150,000 people will die today, and all of them will have died with their sins paid for, but only a few will have taken up that sin offering for them. My question today is for you: are you ready to meet the Lord? Because he's coming, and he's coming whether you're ready or not. Well, this is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.